Welcome to the Ascension Star Gate podcast series, where we discuss the aspects of human consciousness, spirituality, metaphysics and philosophy, energy, extraterrestrial life, science, biology, and the alchemy of higher states of beingness, all from a heart-centered perspective. I am your host and guide, Glenn Mate, and let's begin our journey.
Well, welcome everybody to another fantastic episode of the Ascension Star Gate podcast series. And I am so blessed, so very grateful to have such an esteemed guest again today. And I like to call this guest another champion because this is the second time that they've appeared on the Ascension Star Gate podcast series. And we get to co-create and talk about some great topics today. This is going to be so energetic for you. I'm so excited to share this information. So without further ado, let's introduce Dr. Loren Cielo, a clairvoyant healer and teacher, is the creator of Golden Rose Psychic Services in sunny California. And this internet platform that Dr. Loren Cielo has developed and utilizes all the time is for clients and students around the globe. So you don't have to be in just North America. You could be anywhere from Malaysia to France to Italy to Australia, and you can get in touch and work with Dr. Loren Cielo. And as Dr. Loren Cielo is a former engineer turned psychic, Loren's work closes the gap between spirituality and metaphysics in fun and often unusual ways. Dr. Cielo, welcome to the show again.
Oh, thank you, Glenn. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I love your platform, by the way. Great job.
Well, thank you so very much. We like to share information, and, you and I click together in that way where we really use our heart's intelligence to speak to people in a way that is resonating and inclusive. And I just love that about you because you're so open to whatever comes your way, whatever person has a question that needs to be answered or they're looking for guidance, that you have this wonderful knowledge base to really speak to this person, but not in just like, we're having a conversation. There's so much depth to that. And I'm very grateful, and I can't lift you up enough. so so thank you. I want to kind of just jump in, Dr. Cielo, and talk about how you are perceiving through your special abilities, through your special gifts, and how you translate that information to clients and students and workshops and all of the great things that you're doing today.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we find ourselves in a very unique time. And, I'll be 64 by the end of this year. So I'm blessed that I got a taste of what it was like well, I have an inkling of what it was like before the shift started. Anybody younger than I am probably might not have the same perspective. If we go back, we always have to get perspective, So let's go back to all of the eons where Homo sapiens were farming, even earlier hunting and gathering. There was a set of beliefs. They had slavery was fine, right? Maybe raising children a certain way, the way we treated animals, certainly the way women, the opportunities women had were so different than now. And I remember, as you said, being an engineer, I was lucky because I had early access to the internet. And so on my lunch breaks, I was, there was no Google. I was searching all these different, ideas about ascension and, the end of the Mayan calendar, all that kind of stuff. And it kept saying over and over that for the change to happen, and what I mean by the change is our next ascension, because there's been many on this planet, right? Our next ascension is driven by the rising of the female principle.
Mhm.
So that's what I witnessed through my life, is how different. I mean, to be quite honest, Glenn, the only two things women could be forever was a wife and a prostitute.
Right.
That's, I mean, that's it. And
Yeah.
now, of course, we have a different, we're living in a different reality, right? And we're right on the cusp of falling all the way over into the new paradigm, if you want to call it that. And so first, let's talk about what that paradigm is. In my clairvoyant classes, at the end of the second advanced one, I crunch the curriculum down during the course so that I can do a four-part Ascension series. And it's so funny because I just started the first of the four workshops this last weekend, and here we are talking about Ascension.
Yes.
And so one of the things and thank you so much for all the kind things you said. One of the things that I like to do is to distill these complex, maybe what seem uncomprehensible concepts into something just so easy. So I
Mm.
always say at Golden Rose, it's not rocket science. What I'm teaching is not rocket science.
Right.
So there's so many definitions for where we're at right now. One of them I like is that we're moving from the fourth dimension to the fifth dimension. Right. And so what I like to say about that, to really break down dimensions,
Mm.
well, if you've ever tried to buy a piece of furniture at IKEA, you understand the first three dimensions, trying to get that dresser to fit in your bedroom, right? Height, length, and width, right? And then if we take that and put it more into um, a cosmic environment, if we were to, and physicists and astronomers do this, and I remember from high school physics, they pick a random place out in space and they give it the coordinates, just a random place of 0, 0, 0. Now, if you move up from that random space, the coordinates become 1, 0, 0. If you move sideways from that spot, it becomes 1, 1, 0.
Right.
If you move forward, it becomes 1, 1, 1. So from that little height, length, width model, they can map the entire universe. But there's one more: time.
Mm.
So if I'm trying to predict when a nebula is going to be at coordinates 365, 700 million, I need to have the time that it's going to be in that physical place in
Mm.
space. So we understand the fourth dimension very clearly.
Yes.
So if the definition of the ascension we're going through is moving from the fourth to the fifth, well, what that implies is all you have to do is wait through time
Hmm.
and you'll get to the fifth. I mean, again, it's not rocket science. So, um, the definition I like for our ascension, and again, it's very practical, is that our planet, our solar system, our galaxy is moving into a new place in space, and that place has a higher frequency. That's
Hmm.
it. So again, if you stay on this rock long enough, you'll ascend. You'll move into the fifth dimension. Now, my students always ask me, what's the fifth dimension? I don't know, right? But I have a suspicion that when I'm doing a clairvoyant reading, and maybe I could give some background on what that's like. If you thought in your mind about a red apple and you have that imagery in your mind's eye, that's clairvoyance.
Mm.
The only thing different between imagining a red apple in your mind and reading someone else with your clairvoyance is that it's out there. I'm reading energy
Right.
that's over there, right? I'm absolutely sure it's not in me, it's over there. So, where am I reading? What dimension is all of this energy that I'm reading? I think it's the fifth dimension. So, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. But for a Homo sapien to use their chakras to read in the energy of someone else or something else, where is that happening? where are those colors that I see in your chakras? Right. So I'm starting to suspect I'm not, and anybody can do this. I'm not special. That we're actually accessing the fifth dimension when we're using our chakras to read energy. So I've also thought this was really interesting. Another definition of ascension, it puts it on two levels, a personal ascension and a planetary ascension. And if we were to talk more about it from how we experience that, we might say that a personal ascension is when our belief system changes,
Hmm.
right? Just like no slaves, no beating animals, no beating children, women can do what they want. And it hits a tipping point where each of us have changed our belief system to a common one. And it hits a tipping point in the population that makes the planet ascend. In other words, the collective consciousness has changed.
I love
Now, I
that.
remember reading about a computer modeling program. I think it was in 2010, something like that, that calculated that once 10% of the population has made a quantum leap in their belief system, the ripple effect is the collective consciousness changes. So when I read that, I thought, well, I better do some computations here. So how many people are on the planet? Right. And they estimate it's 8.2 billion. So 10% of 8.2 billion, right? Eight is 8
Eight
million.
million two hundred thousand.
Right. Right. So just for kicks, I decided because at the time that we're recording this, the No King's March just happened. So I just kind of Googled how many people went to that? 7 million. So,
Wow.
man,
That's a great number.
yeah, we're getting pretty close to the tipping point. And I know what we were going to discuss is the chaos that we witness, right? It's growing pains. You know, I think the pandemic was a trial run
Hmm.
for how you personally navigate a pressure cooker. I know probably most people that are listening to this notice two things about themselves. They would focus externally on what was happening and get riled up one way or the other. I call it fussy, fussy in some way. And then their very next reaction was to focus inward and go, okay, what can I do to relieve the fussiness? Right. So when we look out and unfortunately we see some people who are really struggling, I think they're missing the second step. Right. Instead of looking out there to, that's where the problems are. It's might be more beneficial to look in here.
Right. When we look at that and we look at through like the scientific lens of neuroscience, we know that our brain function is projecting what we're thinking all the time, right? It produces more of. The thalamus is always looking for that pattern recognition. And we know that that's mainstream science today. That's not nothing, that's cutting edge. So if we're constantly looking at the things that what's wrong? What's wrong? I can't believe that's wrong. Why is this happening? Why is this system so rough? Why are people fighting? And we don't look at it from the lens of, okay, we understand that this is like the balloon that is growing, 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 and it's going to reach its bursting point some
Yeah.
time. But inside, what it releases is completely new. It's something brand new is coming out. It's like, the shell of an egg, right? And all of a sudden, it's going through its gestation period, and then all of a sudden, this beautiful chick comes out.
Yes. Yes, it is a very difficult time to be embodied. But let's put that into perspective too, right?
Right.
So my grandparents lived through World War One, the Spanish flu, the Depression, and World War Two
Mm,
in one life. So put that into perspective,
right.
right? Yeah. So
Difficult. difficult times, very
Very.
trying, very hard. Put a
Yep.
loaf of bread on the table was took, days worth of work.
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree with you. I always try to zoom in and then pull back and see whatever I'm looking at in context to other things. As a matter of fact, hearing myself say that, that's exactly how I do psychic readings.
Hmm.
Like I am the most practical psychic I know. I'll give information and then in my head I hear, well, how could that possibly help somebody? Like some crazy psychic is telling you to do this or, do that. Well, how can that help you? So for everyone listening, do that. Take that macro and then bring it to the micro and keep moving back and forth, right?
Hmm.
Again, if you're not doing that, like my main guide, Anki Yaya, I know, very funny name, he always tells me, Lauren, do you want the brick or the feather? I'm like, I want the feather.
But we're so used to carrying bricks on our shoulders. We've gotten good at it, and that's something to be concerned about. We need to make
That's
that
true.
shift.
Yeah. That's a very good point you bring up. You know, like your intro alluded to, I like to take spiritual concepts and put them into metaphysics because I have to be able to add and subtract things to understand them, right? So, um, being able to um, I call it ground the information into the earth plane. Like, so for example, some spiritual traditions might say that taking the path of least resistance may not be beneficial.
Mhm.
Well, I come from electronics. Electrons always take the path of least resistance. A river doesn't flow back uphill. There is nothing in this reality that doesn't follow the path of least resistance. So, now that does mean that you've got to do some energy work, right, to
Mhm.
release that resistance. Um, there's two things that really stick out in my mind about watching our brothers and sisters navigate what's happening. One was the COVID pandemic, and this poor woman was videotaped, and I just want to say I'm so glad there were no cell phones that could videotape when I was doing my freakouts in my 20s and 30s. Thank you. But she was at a Target or something, and there were all these masks on a display, kind of like a sunglass display. Oh my gosh, this poor woman just freaked out and started ripping them all off, throwing this huge tantrum, and my heart just felt so bad for her, and then I just happened to watch a couple clips from this last weekend's events around the world, and some poor man jumped out of his truck, ripped an American flag out of somebody's hand, took it over, broke it over his knee, and was just so angry. And I felt so much compassion for him because they're not looking inward. They're
Mhm.
only focused outward. You're doing this to me. You're not doing that for me. Right. Well, that's okay to start there, but then you've got to go, wait a minute, why does that bug me?
Right.
What resistance do I have? Again, we always take the path of least resistance. So always try to identify when you go into resistance and release it. And there's tons of ways, of course. For me, and probably you, before I understood energy, it was working out.
Hmm.
That's how I released resistance. I come home
Oh,
from
just
work and
pump
I'd be
that
like,
energy out till I got
yeah,
nothing left, and then I
yeah,
don't have any energy.
exactly. Luckily, at 64, I don't have to do that anymore.
Right now, it's like, okay, I've got enough, and this is good. Oh, I love that. It's so true. There's just so much that's happening in the world today. And, we go from the movements that are taking place socially, economically. There's things happening that, we're labeling disclosure. So, we're talking about the possibility of other beings, of other things coming into our world. And all of this is happening at one time, and yet it's the revisitation of some of those energetic presences that you spoke about earlier, First World War, Second World War, depression, economic decline. And we couple that with all of the social things that are happening between the independence of genders and increasing responsibilities and becoming single parents and trying to raise a family. And wow, how do we navigate all of these energies that are coming at us? They're social media, they're on the television, they're in conversation, they're in the workplace, they're in, every gathering.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's go into some of the more juicy things on how we can actually start to work through all of these energies that are coming at us. And we can't really, duck and hide and, move between them. They're like whop.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the training that I received 15, 16 years ago, it started with my own energy field, of me becoming very aware of myself. Because to be a good psychic, you have to know where you end energetically
Mm.
and another person begins. So basically, I'm sure I'm reading them and not me. So I have to become very aware of what I call from the seventh layer of my aura in. And the seventh layer in the way I'm trained is the outermost layer. So if I can somewhat at some times control what's happening in here, right, then it's much easier for me to handle what's happening outside of my aura. So again, that inward reflection. And the way I was trained, there are specific energy tools that do that, right? A practice of it's called meditation, but I don't really like that word because I remember trying to meditate, 40 years ago. Like, I guess I'm just supposed to sit here quietly with my eyes closed. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I need to pay that bill. Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, my cat's meowing. Bing, 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 bing. So it's really running energy is what I do, right? So if you thought of our energy field, I like to call it energetic respiration because
Mm.
I'm exhaling energy down into the earth and then I'm pulling energy into my field that I want. So it's like inhaling and exhaling. Now, everything is grounded, whether you're a Homo sapien, a monkey, a kitty, we're all grounded, and there's really no way not to be grounded into the earth. But maybe some examples that of people not being very grounded might be basically a homeless person.
Mm.
They can't provide their own food, shelter, and clothing because they're not grounded deep into the earth. So I know this all sounds woo-woo, and that's why I explained it very carefully. You have a first chakra. If you're sitting down right now while you're listening or watching this podcast, you're sitting on your first chakra. It's shaped like an upside down tornado, and you're sitting on the small part of the funnel. It spins down there, right? So it's what grounds into the earth. And so what we visualize is a grounding cord, which is a big tube, big hollow tube, maybe as big around as a dinner plate. And you can make it fancy, you can make it colorful and lots of textures if you like to. And then you just imagine that you grab it like a sock and pull it up over your first chakra. Now, first chakras plug into different parts of anatomy. So if you've got male anatomy, you're going to attach that cord right where your seat meets the seat you're sitting in. If you have female anatomy, you're going to pull it up into your body, almost up to your belly button. Basically, your first chakra plugs into your sexual organs. So that gives you something to aim for, right? Now, once it's connected to you, you can just imagine that it falls all the way down through the earth with no effort and plugs right into the center of the earth. Now, this gives you a conscious, I created it, I know it's there, energy tool. And then what I do is I imagine there's a big button on it, like, and right there underneath the chair where I can reach, and I push it with my psychic finger. And that starts a gravitational pull downward. Glenn, I can sit and ground. I don't know, when I'm doing it, I don't have a sense of time, but easily for half an hour, right? I'll be sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, I felt that leave. Okay, I must be done. Oh no, there's another big thing that just went down the court. Okay, I'm done. Oh no, here's another one, right? So it's just this you might think of it as decompression. That's what it feels like. I remember I woke up in the middle of the night and I was just impacted with energy. And so I put a grounding cord down and again, I just grounded myself to sleep. I just kept
Mm.
taking deep breaths and with a mindset of releasing down the cord. And in doing that, you become so aware of yourself. It's like, oh my gosh, that was in my shoulder. Oh, now I'm noticing my left foot. Right. So that's what I mean about becoming very aware of yourself. So that's the exhalation. Now, I remember going to a psychic way before I was ever trained. And of course, the only time I did, I think I might have had four readings before I got trained. Of course, I was in total emotional breakdown and didn't know what to do. Like when I meet with a client at the beginning of each session, I feel it's silly to say, well, how are you? Because nobody's fine when they book a psychic reading. You're not doing it
Right,
because you feel fantastic.
right.
So I would be at my wit's end. I'd go to these psychics, and I remember so distinctly. One of them said, Loren, you need to let go and let God. And she said it so profoundly. I wanted to lunge at her. I mean, I could see me coming. Don't you think I would have done that if I knew how before I paid you this money to tell me to do that? Right. So I'm going to show you how to let go and let God. Ground is your letting go. And then letting God, you can ask the Supreme Being, whatever you think that is today, and ask it to drop down a golden cord from above you and just grab it and plug it right into the top of your head. So as you're releasing down your grounding cord, you can be receiving. And when
Mhm.
I read gold is the highest frequency I can see so far, right? So that golden energy just comes down, filling in the places where you've released the resistance, the fear, the frustration, right? All the F words, everything that falls under the umbrella of fear, and start to allow that honey energy, that's how I feel it, to start to fill you back up. So those are like two so easy tools. So give yourself a chance, maybe. For me, it works better if I sit upright and put my feet flat on the ground. As a matter of fact, that's the way I'm trained. So if I'm like right now, my feet are flat on the ground. I can do very little with my feet crossed like that. I always go, oh, I gotta spread my feet out. Another thing that might help you in that simple little exercise is to sit in the center of your head. And that might sound weird, but let me give you the lowdown on that. Part of our higher self, our eternal consciousness soul, comes into our body. And I call that part our awareness.
Mhm.
And where it's supposed to be is in the center of your head. I remember when I first went to the open house for my training, and the teacher said, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and wherever you are, move into the center of your head. And I was like, oh my God, like I felt movement. Like, and my mind's racing. I'm like, oh my God, what part of me moved? Like, where was I? What's going on? Right. Well, I was right out here in front of Lauren's face because Lauren had so much stress and anxiety in the energy field that it didn't want to come into a really stressed out Homo sapien. So it floated right here. So when I closed my eyes and said, move into the center of my head, I totally felt movement. I took out my credit card and I said, I'll take it. Ring me up. I'm taking this course. Okay. So try that, right? Try moving into the center of your head. This would be what other people say, grounded center. When you hear people say that, that's what they mean. Ground yourself, move into the center of your head, and then allow God to come in through the golden cord. And just simple little things like that.
And there's even the more visceral, the more physical way of grounding, right? When we can get outside, remove ourselves from the asphalt and the concrete, and really put our bare naked feet on Mother Earth, right? And then we could even do standing or sitting. We could do that same technique of, allowing things to drain down, 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 down into the very center core of Mother Gaia, and then bringing in that sunlight, that
Right.
golden sunlight, just like you spoke of before, the golden honey, to bring that and allow that to just drace and drip and cover our body. And that gives us the same effect of grounding. We're doing that more physically,
Absolutely.
right?
Is exactly the same thing. Whatever visual that you like. I would say the important thing is when you first start doing that, I say this, a lot of what I did as an engineer was a statistical process control. So what that means is, let's say you're making screws, right? I can statistically calculate the quality of your screws if you show me 21 data points. So if you give me 21 of your screws off your assembly line, I can mathematically predict how many of them will be good and how many of them will be faulty. So I always tell my clairvoyant students, you have to do it 21 times before you can ever form any kind of opinion on, am I doing this right? Is this what it's supposed to be like? So give yourself those 21, 22 data points, whether you're using these energy tools that a left brain engineer likes, or whether
Mhm.
you're going out in nature. Give yourself a time to adjust.
That is absolute science. And, we can revert that back again to neuroscience because when we are trying to either create a new behavior or create a new pattern or revert and lose an old pattern that we don't want to practice anymore, neurologically speaking, it takes between 21 days and 28 days of constant repetition without any break in between for the brain to rewire or to prune to create the new pattern recognition.
That's one of the things I find so stimulating about this reality. It's a wheel within a wheel. It's just reoccurring themes coming back around over and over. You know, at the beginning, I'm not sure this will make it into your podcast or if we were talking about this before, but you mentioned the way I answer questions, right? And what I have found is when somebody asks me a question that I might not have ever considered, I know the answer. And so I learn by people pulling at me because the information is in here. But like you said, the connections in the brain aren't firing. And then all of a sudden you ask it, and I'm like, well, 1 + 1 = 2. Here's the answer. And I'm like, oh my God, I better write that down. I got to revisit that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say that we as human beings are not necessarily intelligent. Like the knowledge doesn't exist up here. The knowledge exists everywhere. Now, when we tap into the frequency of that knowledge, it appears. And all of a sudden, we know, and we're like, well, how do I know that? I don't know how I know, but I know it.
Exactly.
And it's truthful, useful, relevant information, right? So the
Yeah.
more we go in, right, the more grounding we do, the more inner work and introspection of looking and asking those self-awareness questions, the more we become connected to this field of information that's infinite. It's everywhere.
Yeah. And we bring a lot with us. Maybe people who are listening now might have this life experience too. You had some ideas, thoughts, beliefs as a small child, right? And if you communicated them to an adult, they'd be like, why would you think that?
Yeah.
Right? And what I've noticed in my life as I'm grounding, releasing the programming from this society, right? Becoming what I hope is a more authentic representation of my higher self. Those truths come back to me. And now nobody can tell me they're weird or wrong or. So you're right. You do come with a full set of your higher self's information. It just gets overwritten by this society. Like what I always tell my students, men are better than women, whites are better than blacks, dogs are better than cats. And we all know none of that is true.
Mhm. Completely irrelevant information. It's not yet, we adopt. It's like, I like to say sometimes that when we incarnate into this physical body on the physical plane called Earth, that we signed a contract that said we agree to the base blueprint of what the constructive thought process might be, and that certain things are constant, like they're the control that we would use in a scientific type of expression. And as we grow and as we start to learn more about ourselves, we now can peel away layer by layer by layer and say, oh, yeah, that's not true. No, I could make this myself. No, no, that's not true anymore. This is, different.
Yeah,
And
and don't you feel, Glenn, that the energy is so much more pliable now?
yes,
Yes, right. Like if we were having this conversation during the Inquisition, they would have burned us at the stake.
we probably were. And we probably were. And now we're coming back at it for round two, and say, oh gosh, thank God we're not being burned this time.
But in this idea of being a light worker, I do want to put this out there to everybody that's going to try that grounding, right? And that filling back up and hopefully get 21 or 22 data points. When you first start that, you might be very uncomfortable,
Hmm.
right? It might not feel good. Um, as you release more of that programming you're talking about, pretty soon you're just in the flow and you're like, oh, I love this. But I want to kind of put this out there is that part of your higher self that comes into the center of your head, when you fall asleep, it goes back and reintegrates with your higher self. Now, on the astral plane, there's lots of different levels. And probably people that are listening to this, your higher self is at least at level 5 and 6. Okay, well, guess what? This reality is moving from 3 and 4 to 4 and 5. So, what that means to you is every morning when you wake up over here on the astral, you're dancing and you're having fun, right? You're rubbing elbows with ascended masters and archangels. Your body wakes up and boom, you come back to this dense reality, right? So, and not all higher selves do that, right? If your higher self is doing it because you're a light worker, what it wants and what its intention is for you to bring that energy from the higher planes of the astral into this reality to help the planet ascend. So there's a term I use for taking that big fall down and how you perceive this reality, soul sadness,
Mm.
because you remember something higher. You remember that feeling of being connected, of love and, integration with other higher selves and with the supreme being on the astral. So give yourself a break.
Yes. It's it's like going from jello to concrete in a
Absolutely.
nanosecond.
I love that. You crash.
Boom. And here we are. And how do we get back to that jello state again, right?
Exactly.
And
And really that's what we're talking about, right? Releasing the programming, trying to be an authentic representation of your higher self. And that does not happen by looking out in this reality and nitpicking. Why are they making that law? Why are they not making this other law? Right? That's only going to make it worse. So, as light workers, Our higher self intended us to hold the light. So do what you need to do. Eat well, exercise, meditate, get in water. I'm a fire sign, so I have got to get my body in water. So, and it's for the collective. You'll feel
Absolutely.
better and we'll ascend quicker.
I want to pick a topic just to we're going to pick at it a little bit.
Okay.
And I think that this particular topic is very mainstream. It's front and center right now in many, many spiritual arenas. It's front and center in the general population, and it's becoming more and more prominent. And I'm going to use the term disclosure.
Yeah.
And what are we talking about disclosure? So I'll give a quick little preface about disclosure. Disclosure is the person that has information that is maybe drip feeding it to someone that doesn't have it, right? So it's withholding, it's secrecy. And so many light workers want to kind of jump in and say, I'm a star seed, I'm this, I'm that, I want to wear a label, I want to be different, I want to be unique, I want to help the world. And we have that innate within us as light workers, right? But I want to jump in a little bit deeper to this because, you know, just as we were speaking about grounding and losing some of these paradigms, we also have to look at disclosure in a way that we are privy to all information. Now, we talked about this just a little while ago about the field of information is always around us, right? And the more work we do, the more inner work and releasing and being in that state of flow, we also open the door for more information. And when we set the intention, like, I want to know more about disclosure. Now, we need to kind of first reframe that word because it has some negative connotations right around that, right?
Yeah.
And when we start to think of, okay, let's talk about disclosure, but let's talk about disclosure from doing the inner work as a light worker, right? So as we, as a light worker, wanting to do more, wanting to help our society and humanity and our brothers and sisters, we can start to look inside and we can fact check information because the more time that we spend internally and letting that come out, we open up our psychic abilities, right?
Yeah.
We open up our ability to receive information and we can work disclosure from the other side and say, yes, well, they may be saying, and whoever they may be, that information is partial, or that information may not be incorrect, or what they're projecting is really not what's happening. It's not really good, truthful, or maybe it's just dribbled out. So people get used to the thought of, oh, there might be something other than the Homo sapiens on this planet or Homo sapiens in the broad spectrum of our galaxy.
Yeah. Yeah,
So let's
definitely.
dive into some of the work that we can do to continue opening up our psychic abilities to look at disclosure from the inner looking outward.
Yeah. Well, let's just pull way back and just start this conversation by saying, so we live on a little speck of dirt, right? In a huge solar system, in a huger galaxy, in a massively huge universe. Why? Why is there more than the Earth? Why is there a solar system? Why is there a galaxy? Why is there uncountable other galaxies? Why would the creation be that way? Because there's other life out there. I mean, there's no other reason. Why go to the bother of creating this expansive thing that supports one little grain of sand,
Mhm.
right? So intellectually, right? Um, a lot. of what you were speaking about pulls me to the Akashic records and to what's called report stations, where information is chronicled, right? And there's a constant flow of information, especially from the Akashic records into our field and from our field back to the records. So you can actually download, as you were mentioning, some of the information that maybe when we were born wasn't part of the group agreement.
Mhm.
Like how you said, I signed a contract that men are better than women, blah, 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 right? So the Akashic records are on the astral plane. Remember, I said your higher self likes 5 and 6 a lot. Well, it also goes to level 7, 8. There's 12 layers. 7 and 8. That's where the records are. The in the Cathedral of the Souls. I just love saying Cathedral of the Souls. So that's a chronicle of everything that happened, you might say, with the Big Bang. What created this whole, I like to think of it as a video game.
Mhm.
Right. But there's other video games. There's other creations where your higher self can incarnate into. So when you go from one of those video games into another, there's certain things you can't bring in.
Mhm.
And that's what's in those report stations. So let's say again, my grandparents, the information about aliens, extraterrestrials, life forms that didn't happen here, that was not allowed. Are you kidding? No, maybe onesie twosies, but not the collective. No way. That information was sealed up. Right. Now it's starting to come out of the report stations into the records, and now we have access to them. So, probably the easiest way is um, everybody has an Akashic record keeper who is a guide whose job is it to take things out of the records into your field, from your field into the records when you're done with them and files them away. So it would be really easy to ask possibly the Supreme Being to download as much from the report stations as can go into our records, right? Again, this is information from completely different realities, not just in our universe,
Right.
but outside the universe, right? Supreme Being, let us have what we can have now, right? What all the higher selves are in agreement with, bring that into our records. And then ask our record keeper, hey, man, grab some of that good stuff and send it in here. And if there's anything any information in my field that's blocking this new information, pull it out, file it away. File it away in my records. I don't need it anymore. So in doing that, first, energetically, you're exhaling and inhaling, and then you're um, releasing and deprogramming and downloading. Right. So the two together really start to put you in a position where, first of all, you can trust what you believe. I bet, Glenn, you have what I have. I have a BS detector.
Mhm.
I know right away. No, that's either a partial truth or it's not true at all.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So those two techniques combined in a nice little daily meditation, you can really, and like Glenn and I were saying, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I just had this thought. Where did that come from?
Where just
Where?
poof, there it is. And it's literally just like that. It's like, oh my goodness, where did this come? This came completely out of, left field.
And have a journal next to you. So or your phone so you can do some voice memoing because um I find I work best that way. For some reason I have this thing about Einstein. I always wonder how did he on a daily basis work? So he's cleaning his pipe, and all of a sudden he has an idea and he has to write it down, right? So get that process for yourself when you have those epiphanies, because you're going to have to go back and think about it from every angle. Ask again the Supreme Being or your guides for, to have something in your life happens that really helps you understand that concept. So it's so fun because I feel my life is an energetic experiment
Mhm.
and living from that versus they're not doing what they need to be doing or this group of people it's their fault. It's a completely different reality.
Hmm. It's so true. And that goes back to what we spoke about, earlier in this is like what you're thinking about is what is you're seeing. That is the projection. So if you change your thoughts, you're changing your reality.
Yeah.
And if you become, and just to give a little tidbit, when we use all of those higher emotions, right? So you could be frustrated, you could be angry, you could be in a state of depression, you could be in a state of fear. If you can shift out of those emotional states and go into joy, happiness, laughter, bliss, gratitude, that's what becomes more present in your reality. And you get more things to be grateful for, more things to laugh at, more things to smile, more people to, be in that compassionate relationship with.
And it is a roller coaster, right?
Mm-hmm.
So don't think you're going to bliss out and you're going to stay there. Nope.
Yep.
Nope. And when you crash, it's an opportunity to go, oh, wait a minute, there's something in my energy field. Let me start to ground that out. I may not know what it is or who it is or when it is, but be so gentle, patient with yourself. Sometimes, and I've been meditating for, 18 years, been a psychic for 18. Some days I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go work out and get in the jacuzzi.
Mm-hmm.
That's the energy work for today.
That's
So,
what needs to be done. And
right.
I like to call that self-compassionate latitude.
I love that.
Self-compassionate latitude, right? You're giving yourself the opportunity to say, I can't really energetically work with someone today, or it's not in my best interest to fully engage when I can't give 100% because this cup is maybe, three quarters empty and it needs to be 100% full to give 100%.
Yeah. And really, really notice and honor your soul sadness. There's nothing wrong whatsoever
Nope,
about
not at all.
feeling compassion for those who are, and they're not just struggling externally. It's inside them. And I remember that before I started. I mean, I had so many contradictions in my space, so much shame and guilt. I remember what that feels like, and it is not fun.
Right. Very, very deep seated, like it's in the center core of your body. And it's about, pulling those layers off little by little by little, day by day. It's not a one and done, right? None of
No,
this is a one and
no.
done. We're perpetual students of learning, right? It never stops.
Yeah.
It's every day is an opportunity to release and to grow.
Yep, that's absolutely true. And you've mentioned it several times in this conversation. Focus on what you want. Don't,
Right.
if it resonates with you, I'm not saying ignore,
Take the
but
pieces, take the
yeah,
breadcrumbs that taste the best and move forward. Just keep moving forward. You might hear something from this person, you might hear some and process that. Like just
right.
what you said. Allow that information to simmer within your body. How does it resonate? How does it feel?
And,
Does
and,
it
and
feel
be a
like energetic to me
questioner,
or does it
right?
have energy to me?
Yeah, ask those questions. Why am I feeling this way? Right? Why did that just happen? Why isn't this happening? And as you clear yourself more, get more connected to the higher frequencies of your higher self, you get answers.
Right. The more questions you ask, the more answers you'll get, but you'll also find that there'll always be more questions.
Yes, absolutely. One answer spurs three more questions.
Dr. Cielo, we've covered so much good information today, and I am again so blessed to spend some time with you today talking about some of the things that we're the most passionate about and serving others and helping to serve other light workers who are, getting their feet wet, so to speak, into this. Do you have any other insight that you'd like to leave our viewers today before we close out?
Well, I would say this. Maybe start to frame your witnessing of yourself and what's on the outside of yourself, not so much from a good or bad perspective. right? Good and bad have been instilled into us from whatever society we're incarnating in. If you would have been a Viking, it's good to kill.
Yeah.
Like, you can't even get married, own property, anything until you kill. So it was really good, right? Our higher selves are amoral. They don't go by any rules. You might be married and fall madly in love with someone and you're tormented. Your higher self is like, yeah, I love this person. I don't care anything about that other stuff. So maybe start, instead of viewing things as good and evil, positive and negative, maybe start gauging things on the frequency. Like, is this a high frequency? Does this make me, whatever it is, does this make me run a high frequency? Or does this drop my frequency? It's not good or bad. It just either matches you or it doesn't match you. Let's come out of the good and evil, because when you look out in the world and people are dividing each other into good and evil, you see what a mess it makes.
Yes. Let's get out of the judgment and more into the awareness, right?
Exactly.
Just aware. What am I feeling? Ask those questions of yourself. Journal. It's a great idea to journal and write down, and you can, look back at your trajectory and see where you've come and how far you've actually come in days, weeks, and months.
Absolutely.
Dr. Cielo, it's always a pleasure. Again, I'm so very blessed to have you in my life. I'm very grateful. Thank you again, and thank you, viewers, for joining us on another episode of the Ascension Star Gate podcast series. Check back soon. We will have more information, more guests, and I'm sure Dr. Cielo and I will get together again for some more information. We can't wait to bring you more stuff. So have a great day. We love you all.